Hi, it's Sarah, the Tudor Travel Guide here. And this weekend, I'm actually in the glorious and venerable county of Norfolk, the old part of England that was once called East Anglia. So in fact, I'm here in Norfolk to explore 3 little-known places and artefacts associated with the Boleyn family, who, of course, originated in this fair county. Now, the first of these is here, in St Margaret's Church in Tivertstall, which really is in the middle of nowhere. It's a beautiful and idyllic spot. But inside, my friends, we will find an extremely rare artefact associated with Anne Boleyn herself. So, come with me, let's go and see just what lies inside. So my friends, we've come inside the Church of St Margaret and immediately we can see this rare and precious artefact. So first of all, just to say that during the medieval times, all medieval churches would have a dividing tympanum and rood screen. This would separate the nave, the main body of the church, from the chancel near the high altar. Now at the Reformation, most of those rood screens, which contained the figure of the crucified Christ, were removed and destroyed. But here in St Margaret, it survives, both the tympanum and the rood screen, which has been converted, and indeed was converted, on the orders of Henry VIII to show the royal coat of arms. Now sadly, none of those coats of arms remain from the reign of Henry VIII, but this one is directly related to Anne Boleyn's daughter, Elizabeth. And what we see are Elizabeth's royal coat of arms, with her initials ER, Elizabeth Regina, on either side. Now the whole picture is full of Tudor symbolism, because on the right we can see that we have the coats of arms of Henry VII, the portcullis, and above that the rose and crown of Henry VIII, Elizabeth's father. Over on the left side we've got the phoenix in flames of Edward VI, and below that, the pomegranate of Mary I, Elizabeth's sister. Underneath this royal coat of arms, we have a message, God save Queen Elizabeth. And beneath that, a quotation from Romans 13, which says, let every soul submit himself unto the authority of her powers. Further, there is no power but God. The powers that be are ordered of God. And then, right in the centre, in the midst of that quote, we have Anne Boleyn's badge, the white gear falcon sitting upon a stump. Tudor roses are also apparent, and it is holding within one of its talons a sceptre with a golden crown upon its head. In my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful and most overlooked artefacts associated with Anne Boleyn, having completely survived her destruction back in the bloody days of May 1536. So the question is why has this survived intact when so much was destroyed following the downfall of the Boleyn faction in 1536? Well, of course, the likelihood is that the people of Norfolk remain loyal to the memory of the Boleyns and of Anne Boleyn in particular. Of course, that family had a noble descent in this county going way back into the early medieval period, with some of the earliest records being from the 13th century. It was, however, Geoffrey Boleyn who had made his fortune in London, first as a lowly mercer, but ultimately rising to become the Lord Mayor of London, that allowed him to take his family from being mere yeoman farmers, as they had been at the beginning of the medieval period, through to being landed gentry when the family purchased Blickling Hall in the mid-15th century. So when Thomas Boleyn inherited the Boleyn estate after the death of his father, he of course inherited Blickling Hall. Now, the dates in which the children of Sir Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Boleyn were born is, of course, up for a little bit of debate. But if you take Anne Boleyn's birthday as being 1501, then it is highly likely that she was born here in the county of Norfolk. And in fact, there are some contemporary testaments to that fact. Matthew Parker, who would become the Archbishop of Canterbury under her daughter Elizabeth I, would identify himself as her poor countryman, meaning that he too had been born and brought up in the same county as Anne, i.e. Norfolk. And then we have Henry Spelman, who was an antiquary under the reign of Elizabeth I, and he stated that to Blickling was decreed the honour of Anne Boleyn's birth. So, my friends, it seems that the people of Norfolk remained true to the memory of the Boleyns and of Anne long after her remains were cold in the ground. So that's our first Boleyn artefact in Norfolk. Let's go and find the next one. So I've come to the centre of Norwich, and as you can see behind me we have the wonderful Norwich Cathedral, and I've come to explore the second of those less well-known Boleyn artefacts. So why don't you come inside with me and I'll show you something really special. Come on, let's go. So having travelled from the great west doors of the cathedral, up the nave and into the heart of the church by the high altar, we will find to the right of the high altar the Boleyn chantry chapel. It is not hard to see evidence of the early Boleyn family here, for if you look up you will see the Boleyn coat of arms, visible in various guises. The early Boleyn crest associated with Sir Geoffrey, Sir William and Sir Thomas Boleyn, great-grandfather, grandfather and father of Anne Boleyn respectively, consists of 3 bull's heads, clearly a play on the word Boleyn, separated by a red chevron. It was in this chantry chapel that Anne Boleyn's great-grandmother, Anne Who, was buried, following her death on the 6th of June 1484 or 1485 at the age of circa 60 years old. She had previously been married to Sir Geoffrey Boleyn, Lord Mayor of London, but had been a widow for around 20 years at the time of her death. By all accounts, Anne Who was a force of nature, and if you wish to read a little more about her, I can suggest Elizabeth Norton's book, The Boleyn Women. Later, Anne's son, Sir William, Anne Boleyn's grandfather, was also laid to rest in this chantry chapel. It seems that at some point, unfortunately, during the 16th century, Anne's body was moved along with her tomb ledger. You can still find the tomb ledger today, but unfortunately, the brass plaques, which shows the outline of the image of Anne Who and some armorial shields placed around her, have long since disappeared. If you wish to find this tomb ledger for yourself, then you need to head to the passageway that runs behind the high altar. It lies just to the right-hand side, set into the floor, and it is very easily missed. When Elizabeth I came on progress to Norwich in 1578, she had her throne positioned directly opposite the Boleyn chantry chapels, and this was seen as her affording high favour in remembrance to her Boleyn relatives, and gives us some evidence perhaps that Elizabeth always held the memory of her mother and her Boleyn family close to her heart.
Hello, well, I've brought you about, a 10 to 15 minute walk from the cathedral here to King Street. Now you might be wondering, I'm sorry it's a bit breezy today, you might be wondering why I have brought you here with this derelict Tudor looking building behind me. Well, this is the final, less often visited and certainly less well known Boleyn location. It is 125 to 127 King Street, and at the beginning of the 15th century it was owned by William Boleyn, of course the father of Sir Thomas Boleyn, grandfather to Anne. So why might the Boleyn family have property in this part of town, you might be asking yourself. Today it looks pretty deserted, but back in the Tudor period I imagine that this street would have been a bustling hive of activity, because just over the other side from this building is the quayside. So back in the day, of course, this is where wool would be shipped out and cloth brought in. And so a perfect place for wealthy cloth merchants like the Boleyns to have a property. Now, nobody knows originally what the house looked like, or indeed what that long gallery was even used for. And it has lain derelict for many a year now. And there seems to be a good deal of mystery over who owns it and what the intentions are for the property. But I'm sure you agree with me, it would be a crying shame to lose this building, and I intend to make it my business to try and get to the bottom of what is going on with this beautiful old building today. But in the meantime, I'm going to conclude my short story of 3 little known, less often visited locations associated with the Boleyn family in the area in and around Norwich. So, of course, do come along to Norwich to enjoy its many fine charms and very well known locations. But if you are here and you are a fan of the Boleyns, perhaps you want to seek out one or two of those less often visited places. Okay, well, that's Sarah talking to you from the city of Norwich. I hope I've inspired you to go on another adventure in time. And until we meet again, my friends, it is, of course, happy time travelling.